Hello everyone, my name is Samuel Nowak and welcome to POPP. Today our guest is Dr. Renate Rutiku. Welcome Renate, thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for having me.
And welcome back on the roof of the Institute of Psychology, so you can enjoy the marvelous view on the park, which is getting greener and greener. Hopefully in a month or at least 6 weeks it will be super green. So we can enjoy it even more. Today we are discussing, you have selected two articles.
Yes.
They're both related to the topic of consciousness.
They could be. They are both technical papers. They are ways of how to link the psychological and the brain together. So these are methods papers of how we could potentially study the brain and find out how the brain achieves certain psychological phenomena,
So
including consciousness.
So why have you selected those two? What makes them very special for our POPP?
I guess so. There's two reasons. First of all, I wanted to select something that I found interesting and I'm passionate about, and for this reason, like what I think a lot about is this, like how the brain could potentially be built, which functions, which algorithms it could implement so that it achieves visions, hearing, how it puts these two things together, how decisions are made, how memory works, how the different forms of memory differ from each other, and of course then how it could create consciousness as physical matter. But I think this is sort of the Friday afternoon topic that you think about, maybe, not.
Well, it's Monday today.
Exactly. So we stay
Monday morning.
So we stay with the more pragmatic questions. But the second reason why I chose these is that I thought that they may be more interesting or relevant also to all kinds of topics, not necessarily consciousness or perception is what I study, but also other questions about the brain and psychology, because in the end, the brain is in a way shared amongst all of these questions. So this is why I chose them. And
you consider yourself more a neuroscientist or a psychologist?
I guess a psychologist, but I don't, because I hold behavior in very high regard. But I guess the term that I would choose is like cognitive neuroscientist. So it
sounds way more cool than a psychologist.
This is why I try to avoid the term and say psychologist. I am proud of my beginnings.
I forgot to add that Renate worked at C-Lab, the consciousness lab, here at the 3rd floor, where my office is located as well. And I have to admit that Renate is the only person I know who can make me get interested in psychology and neuroscience, because I find it, and especially the topics related to consciousness and brain, which I find super boring. So
why?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like so.
Don't you want to know?
No, I'm more interested in the macro analysis, like in sociology. But let's focus on the articles.
Okay. Yes.
The first one is published in Nature.
Nature Reviews Neuroscience, yes, is one of the sort of more prestigious review journals, outlets for review papers. And this is a review paper on a specific type of models. It's model systems that are used to analyze what neural networks do. These are called attractive.
In your research?
I specifically have not applied them in my research because the data that I record is not at this level that is, I think, at this moment ready. But so with both papers, when I prepare an experiment, and this is a behavioral experiment, this is together with EEG or MRI or TMS or any type of macro scale brain recording or intervention into psychological systems, what I try to do is I try to imagine really how the different levels interact with each other. So, for example, a macro level result would be, let's say, attention, the process of attention in behavior facilitates your behavior. It makes you better at tasks if you pay attention to them, right? And you can stop it, and psychologists may stop at that, and they may build systems around that. But then I also want to know how the brain actually implements this, and why we are sometimes so bad at attention, for example, or why some people have problems with it. So it has to come somehow from the brain, from the biological matter. And so for this reason, I want to also record brain activity. And now I go and record brain activity that I can do in healthy participants, EEG.
And how EEG? That was my question.
Or fMRI, which is this blood oxygenated signal. But I mostly work with EEG. And so now also the things that I analyze are super high level. They don't actually tell me anything about the neural networks underlying. The signals are combinations of large proportions of neurons. I record it, I can compare my conditions that are very cleverly designed so that I can learn something about those macroscopic EEG markers. But now before I even record EEG, I try to look into this type of literature that I chose for today, and see what do we actually know how these macroscopic markers link to the parts that actually do the work, the actual neural networks.
And how?
Well, and this is the question. We don't really know, because as you can also see in the papers that I chose, this is highly technical work. I mean, one has to just also respect the work that goes into even finding out a little bit, or even like doing an experiment like that, to record these types of data, or to even build these models and link them to neural data, often recorded from animals, where you don't even know what the animal is maybe seeing or thinking, right? And so, because the work, even getting this data, is so technologically complicated, one cannot be angry at the science if the results are still very exploratory, very messy. One cannot take it as an answer to these questions. It's more that one should keep an eye open to these types of papers, because it informs my research. It connects it to the levels that are truly important in terms of brain activity.
That sounds super complicated.
Does it? Okay.
I'm trying to come up with some more specific question, but I know what I can relate it to.
Well, I mean, we can talk about this review paper. I think that's because I always approach papers this way. Like I read the title, I read the abstract, and I'm like, this is super cool, this is amazing, I need to know more. Then I read the paper, and I find that oftentimes, so the knowledge is really much more minimal than you maybe would have hoped for, and then you start being critical. So there's always these two parts, right? Like, what can I learn from it, and how much can I actually trust this knowledge that I can gain from any paper, really, even if it's purely like, sociology or any type of research results. So with the review paper, these attractor networks, this type of models that they use, what they also say in this paper is it has been a success story in neuroscience. We know so little, yet these models have really been very successful in understanding how neurons, which by themselves are quite complex, but that is not the power of the brain. The brain is how they work together. And understanding how they work together and how they achieve certain super cool functions, like, for example, robust memory.
And those models you are referring to, when they were developed, or they've been still in progress?
They are constantly in progress. They're not simple, but the first ones, 50 years ago, they're not new. And maybe also one of the reasons why I chose this is that so I've been aware of these attractor network models for a longer time. When I did my master's thesis at the Max Planck in Frankfurt, people were talking about them a lot, usually theoretical neuroscientists who work more with the mathematical models. And so I knew that they have been super successful. But I find that they kind of get lost to this transition to the more psychological research, which I find sad in a way, because I think they can actually improve our research, improve the different levels of analysis, from single neurons to neural networks to areas to large scale networks to behavior, right?
So why do you think they lack this link between psychology and the models they proposed? I mean, what was the reason that it was omitted?
First, it was definitely that we didn't have any way of really recording these things. So the first proof of these models came actually from recording 2 neurons, like a pair of them, which if you look at these models, you need... Maybe I should take a step back and describe like what these models are. So imagine single units, let's say neurons, interconnected in a certain way. And the system can exhibit all kinds of dynamics. What the attractor networks specifically do is that they are connected in a way that they have a few attractor states. So these are states that wherever the system starts out with, so let's say, I give you an impulse, the system is sort of attracted to one of those stable states where it stays in.
Well, it sounds more like physics than psychology.
Well, but I mean, why make the distinction, really?
Yeah, I mean, from a scientific point of view, sometimes you have to blur this. I mean, the distinctions are functional at some level, but sometimes you should just forget about it.
Yeah, and then if you actually go then to the brain of, even if you go to this very hardcore neuroscience, right? Like recording 2 cells that are interconnected, and even
Super
then,
boring.
this is so exciting. Even then, you have to make really big concessions between what you can do in mathematics, knowing all the weights, all the connections, and what you can actually record. And so this was at first, I think, why it was more like theoretical neuroscience, because you couldn't really prove it in the brain. But now more and more, because we're getting really good at measuring insect brains, the mouse model, optogenetics, like these are all the things that have been crucial for proving, really. And I do agree that with some of these systems, we are at this moment, we can prove that the brain really has attractor networks. Now,
we speculate. We speculate at the moment?
No, I think with some of them, like for example in the hippocampus, the grid cells seem to really implement this, but some of the more simple systems that are still, they're very conserved throughout evolution, so head position, eye movement systems, that they exhibit the properties of these types of systems. So even though we may be 1,000 years away from actually recording all the connections in a system, if these systems exhibit the same type of behavior as the model, then we can make assumptions, very good informed assumptions about how this system is connected and built in the brain.
But as far as I got it, there is so much we don't know, that any advances are expected when? In 100 years?
No, I think with this, it's not 100 years. I think it's faster, because things have been also moving much more fast with the improvement in recording technology. But all of these things, again, they come with caveats. And also these models, and now we come to this maybe more critical part, is that I guess the pitfall oftentimes, if you find something that really seems to be a success story, you want to kind of generalize it to, like, this is what the brain does, like this is what all networks do. And this does not seem to be the case. Even like early visual cortex, we already know, is probably working differently. And then also when we then ask ourselves, like, how much do these simpler networks really are relevant for the behavior that interests us, our motivations, our thoughts, our memories, right? So this is where we have to get critical, but then also...
But critical in what sense?
To say that you can always spin a story with data, you can always make like a poetic connection to attractor networks. And there are some papers out there, some work out there that makes this sort of, just in the discussions, like, oh, this could be an attractor network because it may be similar to some of these properties. But it's not only one, like you should always compare different hypotheses, different models, right? You should be critical even though you may see some kind of like a nice story emerging. And it has happened before in psychology, you know, for a while. This is the second paper that I chose, it comes maybe from a background of this Bayesian inference, that perception of what the brain does is it's a prediction machine, so it constantly makes predictions about what's going to happen, what's in the environment, and then, well, basically brain activities making those predictions and analyzing the errors of those predictions. And this is how perception works, this is how the brain works. And well, we have seen that it's probably an overgeneralization, right? You have to be more specific about your hypothesis. And then, even though I am currently considering actually using attractor networks as a model system for some of my research, and this is why I'm looking into them, right? I am highly critical about, like, even if I do find something that behaves similarly, it doesn't say that this is the only system that has these properties. It could be also connected in a different way, but some of the behaviors may be similar. So this is where the critique comes in. However, so I don't find it boring. I find it really an exciting challenge in a way to... So what I find exciting is that I can try to come up with an experiment that tests these things. And so how to do that, it is a challenge, because you have to be informed about all of this boring research of these neurons.
Maybe I was unjust. I just don't find it interesting
It's
from
fine.
my personal
Yes.
point of view.
And I mean, I do see
I don't
that
dismiss what you do,
this is not also...
although I don't find it interesting.
Yeah, I also oftentimes, you know, it is a lot. If you look at it, it's just so much technicalities. But for me, it's kind of like, it's almost like solving a riddle, right? So even if I don't succeed in actually maybe solving the riddle, I find it interesting to try.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I must admit, I expected today's POPP to be hard neuroscience, but I think it's hardcore neuroscience.
Oh no.
Because there are so many plots, so many thoughts you shared with us. But now I think my brain is getting more and more distracted by the super cold wind.
Estonian here.
Yeah, because Renate is Estonian. So I guess she's more used to this lovely but very
Refreshing weather.
refreshing weather. So Renate, once again, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And what? So the next POPP is scheduled for in 2 weeks. So watch us online and see you and goodbye, because we have to evacuate from this really cold roof.